Alrighty, everyone, it is Friday, so that means it's time for News of the Week for November 29th, 2024. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, even though I did get 2 pages here of notes, it does feel like it's kind of a light day here, or light week for news. I had to pull a lot of things that I've already made videos on this past week, so you may hear some follow-ups on things. But first off, happy American Thanksgiving to all the Americans who celebrated. To Canadians, I apologize for taking away your hockey, but happy Black Friday now when you guys are watching this. So, let's get into the news around the league for this past week, starting off with 2 trades, and I'm going to be honest with you guys, they are 2 pretty minor deals. You start off, they both involve Nashville, first off. You start off with between Nashville and Chicago, where the Chicago Blackhawks got future considerations from Nashville in exchange for forward Ryder Rolston, who is on a ELC, which is worth $895K. That ELC expires in 2026. Rolston has 1 goal in 6 games played this season in the American Hockey League. So, minor league trade, really nothing big to talk about there. Just an American Hockey League player going from Rockford to Milwaukee. Let's move on. Next one involves Pittsburgh and Nashville as well. Nashville acquired a 2027 4th-round pick, which actually belonged to the New York Rangers. I think that's the Riley Smith deal, if I'm correct. And then the Pittsburgh Penguins acquired forward Philip Tomasino, who is on a 1-year, $825K deal that expires at the end of this season. He has 1 assist in 11 games played with the Nashville Predators this season. So, Tomasino, little surprising, little bit weird how, he used to be a player who was really trending and was looking like he was going to be a good first-round pick. Just hasn't been that. I think that it's a little bit weird. Could use a change of scenery, and he gets that benefit with the going to the Pittsburgh Penguins for sure, and he'll get more playing time there most likely, as Pittsburgh's depth is not as strong as Nashville's, even though Nashville's depth isn't that strong either. So, again, you can take that what you will, but someone like Tomasino, who has struggled in Nashville the last couple of seasons, maybe a change of scenery will really benefit that kid's career moving forward. Now, we talked about this on Sunday when it initially happened, but I wanted to do a follow-up since the Blues have played more games. Jim Montgomery was hired as the head coach of the St. Louis Blues. Montgomery was the previous coach of the Boston Bruins, was fired last week, was hired on Sunday, and as a result, Drew Bannister was fired from the Blues head coaching position after just having less than 80 games coached. His record came in at 39, 31, and 6 with the Blues in the last 2 seasons, 2 shortened seasons for him combined. So, I love it for St. Louis. I said that in my video. The video is up right now on the channel if you want to go check that out. But I figured I'd follow up with it here because the Blues have played 2 games since then. I think they play today when this video uploads, so it will be 3. But I'm making this before all the games start because I have to go to work later on today. But when you look at Montgomery's record already, he's 2-0. He has a 5-2 win against the Rangers under his belt and a 3-0 win with the St. Louis Blues under his belt as well. So those are 2 teams there who are both competing in the Metropolitan Division playoff race. 2 teams who are very good. The Rangers President's Trophy winners. Devils, I think, are first in that division right now, or second, I believe. They're second in that division right now. And they beat both of them. And I think that's very impressive and shows that Montgomery's had an immediate impact with this team. And even Armstrong said that we wanted to get the better guy. We wanted to get the better coach out there. They wanted Montgomery from the start before Bannister got named the permanent head coach. Obviously, he was not permanent, but he got the interim tag removed. They wanted to get Montgomery, but obviously Montgomery ended up staying with Boston. And when Montgomery was made available, they fired Bannister. They brought in Montgomery. So again, you could say, oh, Bannister got the short end of the stick. And I would agree with you. It sucks. But hockey's a business. Carter said it very well in our Nordcast episode this past week, which will be dropping today as well. He said that hockey's a business, essentially, and that's really, how it goes sometimes with coaches being fired and things like that. Next up then, honestly, for signings and even injuries, it's a pretty light week when it comes to that. Alex Nylander was the only signing that I saw, and he was actually signed on Friday after I made my video. But Nylander signed a 1-year, $775K deal with the Toronto Maple Leafs. He was previously under an AHL contract with the Toronto Marlies. He actually had 14 points in 12 games played with the Toronto Marlies down there in the American Hockey League, and had 8 goals as well. So somebody who was scoring at a really good rate there with Toronto to start the season. Toronto gets all these injuries, and hey, they got to bring him Alex Nylander. So the question that I've seen with Maple Leafs fans, with guys like Gerbankin, Mitten, Steves, Nylander being up there with all the injuries they have, the question is what happens when all the guys come back? You're going to have to place Nylander on waivers, and I'm betting you pretty good money he gets claimed. So Toronto has some real decisions to make here when the time comes, when guys like David Kampf and Matthew Nyes and Austin Matthews come back, which, by the way, none of those players have come back just yet. They are still on injury reserve. And I think Matthews, I don't have it in my notes, but I'll say it here. He is closing in on returning, but still I think that it's going to be a little bit before we see him playing games, possibly this weekend, but we'll see. So, again, Nylander getting signed to a deal is good. I thought he looked good in the 2 games they've played. Nylander is on the power play, I believe. So, I think it's good on the Maple Leafs for experimenting with someone like him. And, hey, he gets to play with his brother as well. That's got to be awesome when you think about it as well. Next up, moving into injuries. There's only one real injury that I really saw. I just mentioned Austin Matthews, but Jordan Eberle underwent pelvis surgery, and he is going to be out 3 months. So, rough loss there for the Seattle Kraken. It's never good losing your captain. Eberle, I thought, has been a pretty good player so far this year for them, but now he's going to be out until at least March. So, we're talking by the end of the season is when they're going to have Eberle back in the lineup, or maybe February. I always have my months wrong whenever I count. But overall, they're going to be out without him for the majority of this season moving forward. Maybe things change and he comes back early, but again, you don't want to rush him with an injury like that. So hopefully Eberle can have a good recovery and come back as soon as possible. But for Seattle, who's like a 500 team battling on the playoff line right now, we'll have to see where that goes from here as well. Timo Meier also made some headlines this past week, being suspended 1 game for a cross-checking play on Zachary Leroux. So I thought that was interesting. I think that it's the right call. I think that you could have argued a few more games there for Meier, but I think the only time Meier's has had supplementary discipline was a fine a couple years ago. So apart from that, really nothing has happened with Meier. So I think a 1-game suspension is the right call for a player like him. And I think that, moving forward, I think that he definitely will be probably trying to take that out of his game for sure. So overall, I think that was the right call, being 1 game. I think he's actually serving it today, so good on him for sure. Next up then, we got some news involving the David Jiricek situation. So Frank Saravelli came out this past week and reported that a David Jiricek trade could happen any day now. And this is kind of like where we're starting to get into the rumor mill, but it's not really a rumor, it's kind of a report. And he also reported that the trade could happen within 24 to 48 hours, but he said that on Monday. It's Friday when I'm recording this video. So I figured that, by the time this news video dropped, I would be able to talk about it, but it hasn't happened yet. So it's really a head scratcher why, first off, it hasn't happened, and second, why they're trading him after giving him not really a big opportunity in the NHL. I don't really understand it. You're going to trade a sixth overall pick that easily. Doesn't compute there in my head. I think that they can probably get a good return for him, a solid return, but I don't understand why you wouldn't just keep him and try and experiment with him. But it's pretty clear that Pascal Vincent did not like him, and Dean Evison does not like him either. So, again, that's another thing that you can bring up there as well. It's really, really weird with how things have gone so far for Jiricek in Columbus. But again, they reported the trade could happen any day now. Obviously, if there is a trade that does happen, I will post it on the YouTube channel. That's a trade where it's like major enough where I will talk about it. Again, trades like Tomasino and Rolston, those minor trades that really aren't that big, I will talk about those in the news videos, but not a separate video like I would for Jiricek. But again, if he does get traded this week, there will be a video on it. It'll be in the next Newsweek video. So, just saying. Next up, the reason why I'm wearing a New York Rangers jersey today, and this is kind of a rumor, kind of a part of the rumor mill, but I'm going to put it here just because I know there's going to be people who are interested in my opinion for it. So, Elliot Friedman said after their 6-2 loss to the Edmonton Oilers on Saturday that the New York Rangers were experimenting with having a midseason shakeup on their roster. The names that were mentioned were Jacob Trouba and Chris Kreider. And those are two names for me that make a ton of sense. I think Trouba we know because Trouba was a guy who was obviously even trying to get traded last offseason. Trouba brought up the fact that his wife works for a medical firm in New York and said that, keep me here for one more year, I'll try and prove myself, and then you can trade me. Looks like they're trying to experiment on trading him now. And then with Chris Kreider, it makes sense because he's been there for so long, maybe change up the veteran regime and core. I get it. Kreider is on a $6.5 million deal that ends, I think, in 2027, 28. I'm not 100% sure. But I think Trouba's on a 1-year deal. So Trouba only has 1 year left on his contract. Then I think he's expiring. So it makes sense for both those guys to get moved. But again, the Rangers are struggling. They've lost 4 in a row. They play the Flyers today in a matinee matchup. Maybe they get the win there. But if they lose that game, then maybe you see something else happen. I'm not sure. But the Rangers are on the brink of losing 5 straight games today. Again, this whole conversation might become irrelevant if the Rangers win today. But I think that it's very possible we're going to see one of those two or both of those players get moved at some point this season or maybe even in the offseason. So keep that in mind. All right, next up, we're going to talk about something that isn't really like a huge hockey news. Well, it is a huge hockey news, but it's not involving the NHL. Paul Bissonnette was assaulted by 6 men at a Arizona restaurant. It was reported that he was trying to help the restaurant staff involving an altercation, and these 6 men just completely jumped him. He actually looks fine, though. I watched the Spin Chicklets episode. He looks fine. The guys who he fought don't look fine. It's pretty wild how he was able to take on 6 people. It's pretty impressive. Even though, obviously you don't wish for that to happen, but it is pretty impressive and pretty wild. But again, Bissonnette was a fighter in the NHL. He wasn't again, that's why he didn't last that long. Not to discredit him, but again, he's a fighter. He's an enforcer, and it makes a lot of sense why he was able to take on 6 non-NHL enforcer, probably drunk people. They weren't drunk, but probably what were trying to get drunk people. So I thought that was an interesting story to mention there. Biz is okay. They have mentioned the 6 players the 6 people who were involved in the assault. So again, hopefully that gets resolved and Bissonnette will get some justice for what those guys did. And definitely, I think that for sure it's a pretty interesting story that made headlines this week. The Canadian national team, so the 4 Nations team, is trying to see if Joey Daccord is eligible to start for Team Canada, and if he wants to start for Team Canada. So Dackard's a little bit interesting because he has heritage from Canada, the USA, and Switzerland. So hypothetically, he could start for either of those 2 teams in the 4 Nations, that being Canada or the USA, and I'm going to be honest with you, if there's a team that he's more likely to start with, it's Canada. And I think that's pretty obvious. You look at America's goalies, it's Hellebuck, Ottinger, and then you're fighting with Swayman and Wolf. Those are your other guys you're battling with there. I think that it's pretty clear if he wanted to play in the 4 Nations tournament, he's playing for Canada. So they're trying to see if he's eligible for that and if he'll say yes. And then also, 2 of the 3 consensus goalies have basically been announced. They've said that Jordan Binnington and Aiden Hill are going to be those 2 consensus goaltenders. Again, I don't really know if that's justifiable. Hill looks good, but Binnington, I'm not really sure if I'm really on the side of that. But again, he is a Cup champion. He has put up some good numbers in previous seasons, but I don't know if I'm for that this year with how the Blues have been playing. But again, they're getting better under Montgomery. So another thing to keep in mind there as well, I guess. But again, something that I thought was interesting to bring up there with Four Nations. Again, the Nordcast and the Nordblock Pod are both releasing rosters this coming week. So expect to see 2 YouTube videos, maybe even like a couple, that are us announcing our Four Nations rosters. That will be happening very soon. So be sure to stay tuned for that. But again, just another thing to promote that is coming up on the channel. Also, watch with Nordic tonight and in December as well. So we're doing a lot of those recently, but we're trying to really ramp up the production with those. So I'm looking forward to that again. Okay, one more thing here before we move into the rumor mill. Sidney Crosby has reached 600 goals in his NHL career. Congratulations to him. Not many players reach 600 goals, so I thought that was a pretty cool milestone there to talk about. But yeah, congratulations to Crosby, and hopefully he will be able to get 100 more in his career before he's done. I doubt it, but it could happen. All right, let's get into the rumor mill. There is not a lot here. There is only, I think, 4 rumors that I wanted to bring up. Again, it's Thanksgiving. It's Black Friday. There really hasn't been a lot of talk around the NHL with rumors, but there is some stuff here. So first off, per Chris Johnston, if the Bruins don't turn things around by the trade deadline, Brad Marchand could be a trade candidate. Now, I honestly think that this probably doesn't happen. I think that we're going to end up seeing the Bruins turn it around because they're 3-1 with Joe Sacco as the head coach. I think they're likely going to be fine. But again, for the Bruins to come out, for Chris Johnston to come out and say that, I think it's very creditable. And again, Marchand's on his last year of his contract, and who wouldn't want the gritty player of Marchand on a cup contending team? Boston, I would say, is a cup contending team. They're one of the lower level contending cup teams. But imagine getting Marchand on the Panthers. That would never happen. Imagine getting like Marchand on the Oilers. Or Marchand on the Hurricanes. Again, half of those wouldn't happen because Marchand hates the Hurricanes and the Hurricanes hate Marchand. And I didn't even bring up the Leafs because I know that's not happening. Like that, I can't imagine that happening. But again, imagine somebody of Marchand's level on one of those playoff teams. It's realistic, and I think that it is something that people need to consider if the Bruins are not in a playoff picture. 2 of the 4 rumors involve the Ottawa Senators, and we're going to dive into it right here. And I want to make a video on Ottawa. It's likely happening next week, but the Ottawa Senators have considered shaking up their core, and Josh Norris was one of the names that was really mentioned per Frank Saravelli. So this is interesting, and I 100% get why this is a big rumor and why a lot of people are attracted to this when you look in terms of Ottawa and their overall team, because nothing they've done has worked. They fired the coach. They fired the GM. They fired the owner. Well, they didn't really fire the owner. They got a new owner. Rest in peace, Melnick. And it's still not working. It's still not working. November has still been a clear struggle for them. They just can't seem to win games in the month of November. It has become abundantly clear. And I think that it makes a ton of sense that they want to shake up their core. If they're still not winning in November and they're still really struggling to start season, something's got to change. Again, we did say that with Vancouver, but enough is enough at some point. Ottawa has gone through this 5 years in a row, and they still can't have a solid start to their season. I don't get it. And we're gonna get to February, and they're gonna light it up, and they're gonna light up the league, and they're gonna be one of the hottest teams in the second half, and not make the playoffs, and end up with like a 7th overall to 14th overall pick, because that's how this works. That's how this has worked. And I get Josh Norris being a name that's considered, And I think that he could get some real traction. But again, the injury is a real concern, I would also think as well, with Norris and how the last couple of seasons he hasn't been a healthy player exactly. But again, this year, when he is healthy, he looks good. So I think that he's a center who teams should really go out and consider. But also, with me saying that, per Bruce Garrioch, they have said that Ottawa is also interested in adding another defenseman. So, again, that's another thing you can bring up there. I think that Ottawa for sure should be looking at adding another defender because you look at their overall depth, it's not good on the blue line. I think as long as you have Travis Hamonic on your roster, I don't think you're in good shape. Seriously. So they need to go out and find another defenseman for sure. That's another thing. Maybe those two correspond. Norris for a defenseman. How about it? How about it? You shake up your core and get a defenseman. Kill two birds with one stone. I know it's hard to move on from someone in your core, but again, something's got to give here. Something has to give here with this team. All right, let's move on to our last piece of rumors here with the St. Louis Blues. It looks like Doug Armstrong has said that he is actively pursuing the market, actively for some offensive help. And again, their depth is not good. You know, they are winning games, but I don't like their depth. I like the offer sheets of Holloway and Broberg, but offensively, their depth is not good. They need some more depth. They need to find a guy who is having issues with the team or is on the trade block and go out and get him. And it's got to be somebody who's cheap as well. It can't be like an expensive long-term player unless if you're really committing to, a player who is really solid. They really need to go out and examine this option and figure out what they want to do moving forward. But again, what do I know? All right, that's your news of the week for November 29th, 2024. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Again, we just did that in under 22 minutes. You'll love to see that. That's kind of the goal that we want to get at with these videos. But again, thank you guys very much for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, subscribe down below. I greatly appreciate it. Again, comment down below your thoughts on the news we talked about today. Again, like the video, subscribe down below if you're new. We do have a Watch with Nordic tonight, 9 p.m. Stars versus Avalanche, so stay tuned for that. But anyways, that'll do it for me. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next week.